Welcome back, Leo Lions. This is Mrs. Morkin with today's lesson over multiplying and dividing real numbers. So we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing integers. Remember, integers are positive and negative whole numbers. So really any negatives that you see, and then we're going to multiply fractions as well, multiply and divide. So the two rules for multiplying and dividing, luckily they are the exact same rule, so that makes it nice and convenient. If the two numbers have the same sign, so both positive or both negative, then the answer is positive. And then if the two numbers are different signs, so one positive, one negative, then the answer is negative. And then you multiply, divide the numbers as normal. Sometimes I like to use this face to help me remember. And how that works is, and I sometimes call this my sleeping man, and this works for multiplying and dividing. If you cover up the two signs that you are using in your problem, so let's say one's a positive or a negative and the other one's a positive, you cover those up with your hand, well then what's left over, then you know your answer is negative. Or same thing then, if both numbers are negative, you would cover up those negative with your hand, or those negatives, and you would have then a positive left over. So that's just a way to help you remember the difference between those two rules. So a couple examples here. This first example, I want you to notice exponents go to what they touch. So this exponent, this 2, is touching the parentheses. So what that means is we're actually going to do -4 times -4. So a negative times a negative, I know my answer is going to be positive, and then 4 times 4, so we get 16. Now, example 2 is a little different because the exponent, or that power of 2, is touching the 4. So what that means is 4 times 4, but then we still have that negative in front there, so it looks like -4 times 4. So in this case, different signs, our answer is going to be negative, and then 4 times 4 is 16, so -16. So always be careful because those two problems often get mistaken for wrong answers. Make sure you pay close attention to what those exponents are touching. Next one, so we have a negative in front of the square root sign, so we know it's going to be negative, and then the square root of 64. So what number times itself? So 8 times 8 is what gives us 64. So the square root of 64 is 8, and then in this case it's -8 since it has that negative in front of the square root sign. All right, now this one, notice we have this sign in front. So this sign in front means the positive and negative answer to both of these. And if you notice in that sign, there is a plus sign for the positive and then the minus sign underneath it for a negative. Now also what happens here is the square root, if you ever have fractions with square roots, you can separate it into the square root in the numerator and the square root in the denominator. So our two answers here, square root of 1 is 1, square root of 36 on the bottom is 6. So it could be positive 1/6, and it is also negative 1/6, the positive and the negative answer, so we actually have two solutions for that one. All right, and last one here, we have same signs, negative divided by negative, so I know my answer is going to be positive, and then 20 divided by 4, we get our answer of 5. All right, so there's some examples of our negative rules. Now let's look at fractions. Our rules for this are we do not have to find common denominators. So in this case, we just want to multiply straight across. So we'll multiply numerators together, and then we'll also multiply denominators together. So multiply straight across. I'm a big fan of cross-canceling, and that way you make smaller numbers. So cross-cancel if you can. Sometimes you can't cross-cancel. Okay? Then next thing here for dividing rules. So the dividing rules are kind of similar to our subtraction rules with integers. So we keep the first fraction the same, exactly how it is. The division sign we change to a multiplication sign, so division to multiplication. And then the last thing we do is flip the last fraction. So same, change, flip, those are our division rules. And then once you do that, you're changing it to a multiplication problem, so you just multiply straight across, okay? Last thing that is really, really important here, and I'm going to star, with mixed numbers, adding and subtracting, we can keep the mixed numbers how they are. However, when we multiply and divide, we have to change them. So mixed numbers must be changed to improper fractions. And unfortunately, it does not work if you keep them as those mixed numbers. So mixed numbers must be changed to improper fractions. All right, and we'll get some examples here. First of all, here is another definition. So multiplicative inverse. Multiplicative inverse is the exact same thing as what we call the reciprocal. So sometimes you'll hear it called multiplicative inverse, sometimes you'll hear it called the reciprocal. So basically this definition is two numbers that multiply to 1. Two numbers that multiply to 1. So that is the actual definition. The nice thing is with fractions, a reciprocal, what we're going to do is simply flip a fraction, and a flipped fraction is the reciprocal. And if you think about that, let's say for example here, we have, let's say 1/4. If we flip that fraction to 4/1, which remember is a whole number, 4/1, if we multiplied those straight across, we'd get 4/4, which is 1. So that is why these two numbers, 1/4 and 4/1, those are what we call reciprocals. They multiply to 1. Okay, so let's do some examples. First one here, I always look at my signs first. So 9/10 is positive, divide by -4/5. I know in the end my answer needs to be negative, and I often write it down right away so I don't forget. Okay, same, we keep 9/10 exactly how it is. Change, we're going to change that division sign to multiplication. And then last step, we're going to flip. So I'm going to flip 4/5 to 5/4. Now, I'm ignoring that negative because I already took that into consideration. I already wrote it down, so I don't have to worry about those negatives. Okay? Now, cross-canceling, if you don't know what that means, look at your diagonals. So 10 and 5. Think about just simplifying a fraction. So both of those can be divided by 5. So 5 divided by 5, I'm going to make it smaller. 10 divided by 5, I'm going to make that number smaller as well. Now the other diagonal, 9 and 4, we cannot simplify anything there, so those just stay how they are. So multiply straight across, we get 9 times 1 on the top and 2 times 4 on the bottom, which is 8. So we can simplify this. We can say 9/8, or this is a bigger number on top, an improper fraction, so it'd be 1 and 1/8. Now I'm not going to forget because I wrote that negative down here, so I'm going to write it with my answer, -1 and 1/8. And if you forget and you leave it as a positive, technically it is correct or incorrect. That would not be a correct answer if you left it positive on accident. Okay? Let's do it again here. Now we have multiplication, so we don't have to do the same change flip rule. We do have different signs again. -1/2 times 4/5. So right away, I'm going to write down here negative so I don't forget. And now I'm just going to multiply. So 4 times 1 on the top. Actually, let's pause for a second because I can cross cancel again. So look at your diagonals. 1 and 5 we can't do anything with, but 2 and 4 can both be divided by 2. And we can cut them in half. And now let's multiply them so our numbers are smaller. So 1 times 2 on the top, 1 times 5 on the bottom. And then don't forget, I wrote that negative down here to remind myself the answer has to be negative. So -2/5 is my solution. All right, one more. Here I see two negatives, -2/3 divided by -1/3. So I'm going to write down a plus sign just to remind myself that I took care of that, and I don't have to remember in the end whether it's positive or negative. I already wrote it down. So same, I'm going to keep the first fraction the same, change the division sign to multiplication, and then flip the last fraction. So 1/3, I'm going to flip to 3/1. All right, cross cancel. 2 and 1, can't cross cancel any there. 3 and 3, since they're the same number, we can divide them by 3, make them ones. So 2 times 1 on the top, 1 times 1 on the bottom. And don't forget, anything with a 1 on the bottom, it's a whole number. So this is going to be positive 2. Now, you don't have to write it with that plus sign in front. Remember, if you don't have that there, it is a positive 2. I simply wrote that positive down to remind myself I took care of the negatives already. All right, so there's some examples with negatives and fractions, multiplying and dividing.